Hello and welcome. I'm Juno, intimacy provider and educator, here to share some of my musings with you from my experiences working in the industry. My mission is to support those who are new to doing this work and those who are curious about joining. Something you may be wondering is where we providers see our clients. I do want to note there are some avenues that intimacy providers work, which I'm not going to cover here, such as strip clubs and online services. For now, I'm going to be talking specifically about full-service intimacy providers, which in my experience uses the term incall and outcall to designate what kind of environment we're going to see our clients in. For context, a client may text saying, "Hello Juno, where is your incall location?" Or, "Hey, do you do outcalls?" More realistically, they're going to say, "Hey, babes, you avail? Where's incall?" That's my client voice. No offense, clients. Many of you are great. Few of you, though, I could do probably a whole episode where we could laugh at the types of text messages that I receive. I'd say for maybe every 20 or more inquiries that I get, one actually turns into a booking. Admin is definitely a big part of this work. But alas, however they are going to word it, it's important that you understand what these two terms mean and where you're going to be going. Where do intimacy providers work? What does it mean when we say incall and outcall? And how can you set these spaces up to ideally make them as safe and profitable as possible? Let's start with term number 2, as that one's easier to just knock out of the park. What's an outcall? An outcall is when you go to the client. This is usually their home or hotel, though it could be different locations. These are the most two common I experience, though. It could be maybe a social outcall, so a restaurant or a bar, or perhaps an adults-only club. But yes, usually house or hotel. Whenever I'm booking a new client, personally, I always screen. For me, this means either a selfie holding photo ID or could be a message through LinkedIn. I know other providers who use references from a previous intimacy provider that the client saw, saying, "Yep, saw them, they're all good." Or some people do a quick phone or video chat to kind of feel someone out. If you're currently working in the industry watching this and you have a different way of screening, I would love for you to comment below for myself and others to learn different ways of doing this work. I also ask for a deposit, usually in the form of an e-transfer or sometimes a gift card if they're international and don't have a Canadian bank account, or maybe extra discreet. Sometimes for last-minute in-calls, I will still screen, but I won't get a deposit. For first-time client outcalls, though, I always get a deposit now. I personally don't have a car, as much as I love driving. So if I'm taking a potentially expensive Uber to get to said client, I want to make sure that at the very least my expenses are paid. In my newer working days, I had someone who convinced me somehow that he couldn't pay the travel fee deposit, so I took a $50 Uber to his house, where he then informed me he didn't have any money. Apparently his friend had it and he forgot. So after some arguing, I eventually left and I paid a $50 car back home. So I was out $100. There was no income there. I was in the negatives. So since that, personally, I'm very strict about outcall deposits for first-time bookings. If you want to risk it, because some people don't want to pay deposits, that's up to you. This is just how I choose to work. An added safety procedure you could do for outcalls is having a driver. While I've personally never done this, I've just made my way there solo, I do know that some people use this method for increasing their safety. You can have a friend or somebody that you pay, maybe you have a partner, who drives you to the booking and then waits outside, playing around on their phone or whatever, while you're working. You can text them when you get in saying everything's good, and then they would know when to expect you back. So if you were to not arrive when you should, they are able to go investigate. Again, while I've personally never done this, I can definitely see the benefit. Another outcall tip I have is in regards to hygiene. When someone comes to me in an in-call setting, spoiler alert for what that term means if you didn't already figure it out, I have all my clients shower upon arrival. While they could be a little too quick, maybe not as thorough as I would like, I know they've at least taken somewhat of a rinse and are ready to go before I'm all up in their business. Clean is sexy. With outcalls, I shower right before I leave, and then once I'm calling my Uber, I text my client, say I'm on my way. This would be a great time to hop in the shower. I'd like to think that most people would know I want them squeaky clean before I get there, but I know that's not the case. So, gentle reminder, please be nice and fresh. So that's the gist of what an outcall is and a couple little tips to hopefully make it go smoother. What about incalls? What's an incall? This term is referring to when a client comes to you. As you probably guessed. You smart cookie, you. What kinds of places do providers use as incalls, you may wonder? This partially depends on the working structure that you're using. Incalls can include larger businesses, such as brothels in countries that allow that, or agencies, which are sometimes allowed, sometimes not allowed. I had a short 2-month stint at an agency here in Canada. In my country, we follow the semi-legal, semi-illegal Nordic model, where being a third party, like an agency, is technically illegal. So while really they're not allowed to happen, they are pretty common in the larger cities in Canada, and they help to screen clients, book clients, and provide a often safer working space for providers. What was the space like that I had tried out at this particular agency? My agency had 4 separate units in one condo building. It changed which unit I worked in depending who else was doing bookings that day. There were 2 nicer 1-bedroom units and 2 smaller bachelor units. I think my first shift I was in one of the bigger ones, but then after that, the handful of shifts after, I was working in the smaller units. As I started to get more of a base of regulars and was still getting new clients coming in, aka I was busy and bringing profit to the agency, I was put in the larger units more often. So you can see how they kind of hierarchize who gets what. The admin guy would message me when my client arrived. I would let him know when I was ready. He would tell me when the client buzzed, and I would say when the client was in and everything was good. I would then message after the client left at the end of the booking so he knew that everything was okay. Kind of nice to have that safety measure, someone looking out for you. That was my experience of what an agency in-call is like. I know some do work out of hotels, and there are possibly other structures that are used. When I was touring in Australia the first time, I tried one shift at a brothel. As the laws in Australia generally allow intimacy providing to happen, though it does vary state by state, these brothels are fully legal businesses. You can even find them on Google and rate them. The place I briefly encountered had 2 floors and a dark, moody aesthetic. There was reception when you walked in, and then one side a client waiting room and intro booths, and then on the other side was a hidden waiting room for the workers with a big screen TV that displayed the security camera of who was coming in to the brothel so you could see what clients were arriving. Clients would go sit in a booth. Workers would go in one by one and introduce themselves and their services, and then the client would choose who they wanted and then go upstairs to one of the in-call rooms. These rooms were super well equipped for both hygiene and safety. Each had a washroom and a shower with all the hygiene supplies that you needed, and furniture that was really easy to disinfect, like pleather things you could just wipe down. And they also had a safety button beside the bed, so if you were running into troubles, you could hit that and security would come help you out. Very safe, very hygienic. To me, it felt very impersonable, very transactional. The worker might be able to mitigate this environmental difference with their professional skills. I personally just didn't really vibe with it, so I didn't even finish my one shift, and then I was like, peace, I'm going back to indie. Indie is independent. Being self-employed and running my own business, I like having control over where I see my clients. I feel like the space where we're connecting does really set the tone for our time together. So yeah, I like being on my own and getting to like choose where I'm working. Though I briefly tried an agency and very briefly a brothel, I did start out independent and I'm currently working independent. When I began in the industry at age 22, I was working in Northern Ontario where we didn't have things like agencies. I think there still is nothing like that there. So I had to be on my own and figure it out. I would post ads and then have strangers over to my little bachelor apartment that had no safety security things like a entrance buzzer. I didn't screen people. I didn't know that you could do that. Let's just say I'm super duper grateful that I have no scary stories to share, even though I was sometimes in some situations that could have led to that. Very grateful to be working how I work now. Now at age 30 with more experience in the industry, as well as more confidence in myself and what I deserve, I mainly work out of hotels or Airbnb style apartments. Hotels can be an easy option, especially if the elevators don't have the key card entry. I usually choose bigger, busier locations so my clients can just kind of come in unnoticed, assumingly just another guest of the facility. I do personally prefer more Airbnb type accommodations, and I get ones with washers and dryers so that I can do all my own sheets and towels between clients. I know many providers who work out of hotels and just ask for more of these. I'm nervous sometimes about being caught, and I feel like, yeah, I'm staying here alone for 1 or 2 nights. Could I have 5 more towels and a few sheets and maybe a couple pillowcases? I'm too adverse to confrontation to want to deal with this. If I only need an in-call for a night or two, sometimes I will get a hotel and I'll bring a oversized suitcase with my own sheets and towels and a dirty laundry garbage bag that then I wash at home later. Up to you what you want to do based on your comfort level and your sneaky skills. I'm so bad at lying. I have no sneaky skills. When I'm touring more longer term, if I'm somewhere for a few days or maybe even a week, I like getting apartment style rentals so that, yeah, I can have a washer and dryer and also I can have a kitchen so I don't have to eat out all the time. I say Airbnb style because I actually very rarely book through that platform. Though I think I'm usually pretty good at being discreet, I still worry that someone will figure out what's going on and then the host will write a bad review about me. And then when I want to book these properties in my personal life, I won't be able to get any. Does the client buzz an intercom and I can just let them in and they come up, no issues? Or do I have to go downstairs and meet them in the lobby? Or maybe I'm even in a unit from a house and the nosy neighbor downstairs, the tenant, is watching me have these men come in and I'm not so discreet. I'm not trying to promote any particular sites, but there are larger booking companies that you can get not just hotels, but also these Airbnb style apartments. I really like these ones because they can't leave a review about you. So if I'm not so sneaky, it doesn't impact my ability to book in the future. A third option for in-call spaces is renting from another provider. These can be tricky to find depending on what city you're in. Personally, I'm in Toronto, which is a big city, and there's a really strong provider community here. So from networking within the industry, particularly using social media platform X, I have been able to find people who have their own in-call space, apartment or condo, whatever, that they rent for themselves to work out of, and then also open the space up for other workers to use. Whether you're paying per client, per booking, or you're reserving the space for a whole day, this is a really great option if available to you. They're usually set up exactly what you need to be doing this work. They have lots of sheets and towels, washing machines, hygiene supplies like soap and often mouthwash. And they usually have an effective, discreet system for getting clients in. usually a buzzer that either goes to the unit you're in or maybe an admin assistant. Again, these can be harder to find, but a really great option if you are able to locate them. If I'm touring, I'll just get a hotel or a rental apartment short-term thing because I need somewhere to stay. But when I'm working in a city that I already live in, I would much rather have a good day of work and then go sleep in my own bed. The evolution of working. My independent in-call spaces have really changed over the years. Back in my early 20s, my rates were a lot lower, so the spaces I was using, the prices of them had to reflect this if I wanted to make a profit. I stayed at some pretty cheap, dingy motels back in the day, partially because I was so nervous to get caught then that I would get those ones you just drive up and the door's right there. I thought, they just drive up, jump in. Better than walking through a lobby, up an elevator, down a hall, to a door. Now I think it's much more obvious, but you live and learn. You do what feels best for you at that time in your life. The types of spaces I've used have evolved as my knowledge has and also as my rates have. They continue to fluctuate based on my budget and depending how my work is doing, or sometimes depending on my expectations of how my work is going to do, which at times have proven wrong. As I mentioned, I toured in Australia a couple times. This was generally really profitable once I figured out which cities I did well in. For example, I thought being one of the biggest cities in the country, I would do well in Sydney. Turns out Sydney didn't like me so much. My first time going, I planned to be there for a week. Based on some, I think and hope, misplanning, I ended up staying at this hotel that was very fancy and accordingly very expensive. It was in a swanky area, it was a swanky place, and for 7 days I paid more than my whole month rental for my condo back in Canada. When I would leave, the blinds would come down and the curtains would shut, and then when I would enter, they would open up again. So unnecessary, but I felt bougie. While it did make me look very professional for the handful of clients that I had, unfortunately, I didn't get enough clients to pay this off, so again, I was in the negative for this one. Huge financial bust. Moving forwards, I would get more affordable places unless I had a solid number of pre-bookings with deposits paid, so I was confident that I would be able to still make a profit. A last type of call location that I will mention that some independent providers use is called a carcall. There's probably different names for it, but as it implies, you do your booking in a car, whether that is your vehicle or the client's. I used to do these in my younger working days. Honestly, since I was seeing most people out of my own home, this was probably a pretty safe option and definitely affordable. I personally don't do them anymore, unless maybe it was a kink of one of my regular clients. It's not my thing these days, but if it feels safer and more accessible for you, you go for it. It definitely makes for a cheap in-call location. Or maybe it's considered an outcall? I don't know. Car calls, their own category. I hope these rambly explanations help to shed a bit more light on what it looks like to work as an intimacy provider where we do these bookings. If you're already working in the industry and you have comments on either making these places that I mentioned more safe or more profitable, or maybe you have a whole other type of place that you work, I would love to hear it, and I'm sure our new emerging providers would too. I'm always curious to learn more about the industry, and I'm hopeful that people watching these are looking for tips. So the more we can share, the more we can strengthen each other's profit and well-being. Thank you for listening to Juno's Musings. If you would like a more concise, less rambly version of what we talked about here today, you can check out my blog post on my website, linked in the show notes below. Whether you're new to the industry or curious about joining, I hope you found a couple useful nuggets to support you on your journey. Please subscribe and share if you would like to see more of this content.